and wins FIBA qualifier MVP. While all the other players are staying fresh, staying in the groove, going down.
Look closely at the gold medals around their necks. They're not telling you the truth. Team USA didn't win the FIA World Cup because of veteran leadership. They won to hide what may be the biggest corporate hijacking in the history of women's basketball. The undeniable proof is sitting right there in the box score, waiting for anyone brave enough to see it. Welcome back to WNBA Pro. Lock the doors, silence your notifications, and give this your full attention, because what's about to be exposed will change how you view this entire sport forever. The mainstream media is pushing a fairy tale, hoping you glance at the 84-70 score against Spain and politely applaud, blindly accepting the narrative. But you're not a casual fan, you're an operator, and operators read between the lines. This wasn't a triumphant victory, it was a live, globally televised corporate crime scene, orchestrated by an establishment terrified of losing its grip on relevance. Don't fall for the fake smiles on the podium. The Team USA coaching staff, influenced by a deeply insecure locker room, made one of the most cowardly tactical decisions in modern basketball history when facing a disciplined Spanish team. They completely lost their nerve. Instead of unleashing the most dangerous weapon in the sport, instead of handing control to the undisputed face of the game, they folded. They benched Caitlin Clark in a gold medal game. And somehow, it gets even worse. When she finally stepped onto the court, they did the unthinkable. They played her at power forward. Let that reality sink in. The greatest perimeter playmaker alive, a generational offensive mind who can bend time and space, was forced completely out of position. The architects of this decision reduced the engine of the offense to a passive screener and forced the most dangerous player on the floor to battle a massive 6 feet 4 inches Spanish post. That's not strategy, that's sabotage at the highest level. This wasn't a harmless adjustment, it was a calculated political move. They placed her in an exhausting mismatch on purpose, draining her energy in brutal post battles to suppress her offensive impact. In doing so, they weakened the entire team and risked everything, all because they were terrified of letting her control the game. And when you take the ball out of your franchise player's hands, the consequences hit immediately and painfully. The offense collapses, the pace dies, and everything falls into Spain's suffocating trap. The ball stops moving, the sets become painfully slow, predictable, and easy to break. Under pressure, the coaching staff handed control to Chelsea Gray, giving her 26 protected minutes, and the return was harsh: 8 points, 4 assists, and 4 devastating turnovers. In elite basketball, a 1-to-1 ratio like that isn't just inefficient, it's a disaster. In professional basketball, operating at a 1-to-1 ratio as a starting point guard is the purest definition of total offensive bankruptcy. It means you're actively hemorrhaging possessions, bleeding value, and collapsing under pressure on the biggest stage. It means every decision costs your team, every mistake echoes louder, and every possession slips away like sand through your fingers. And yet, the establishment knowingly chose that inefficiency, embraced it, protected it, because they were terrified of the alternative. They let legacy players like Kalia Copper and Kelsey Plum take over, hijacking half-court sets with selfish isolation plays, abandoning structure, abandoning discipline, abandoning the very idea of team basketball. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why risk a championship just to inflate personal numbers, just to cling to control? The answer lies deeper than the court. It's a multi-billion-dollar secret, a shadowy truth rooted in what could be the most ruthless boardroom power play the sport has ever seen. But before we get there, you need to understand just how fragile, how fractured, how dangerously unstable that locker room really was. Because despite being forced out of position, despite being iced out by her own teammates, despite the system working against her at every level, Caitlin Clark still dominated the only thing that matters: the numbers. She didn't just compete, she overwhelmed the data itself, rising above the politics, above the noise, above the resistance. And in the end, the global stage delivered a brutal, undeniable verdict. A humiliating blow to the very establishment that tried to contain her. Caitlin Clark was named the FIA World Cup MVP. Let that sink in. Not as an opinion, not as hype, but as cold, objective reality. FIBA doesn't care about locker room tension, personal agendas, or fragile egos. They care about production, efficiency, impact. And when the International Committee examined the raw data, stripped of bias and politics, they didn't hesitate. They ignored the chaos, the isolation, the dysfunction, and crowned the true engine of the game. The question now isn't whether she dominated. It's how completely she exposed everything. Because when you finally see the numbers, when you truly understand the scale of it, it doesn't just surprise you, it shocks you.
Oh, let's take a look. Number 1 in points, number 1 in assists, number 1 in true shooting percentage, number 1 in plus minus, number 1 in 2-point field goal.
Listen to that statistical destruction. Number 1 in points, number 1 in assists, number 1 in plus minus. But lock in on the most chilling metric of all, number 1 in 2-point field goal percentage. Think about that for a second. A 24-year-old perimeter guard, a player the establishment insists has no mid-range game, just outperformed dominant, highly paid veteran centers, shooting a blazing 52% from the field. That's not just impressive, it's humiliating. It's a complete, undeniable collapse of the narrative they've been pushing. The veteran frontcourt didn't just lose, they were exposed. And now, the fallout is everywhere. Social media is in chaos, algorithms spiraling as bitter, disillusioned fanbases scramble to process what just happened. The loyal supporters of legacy players are unraveling in real time, flooding the internet with outrage, launching digital meltdowns, even threatening to boycott the WNBA entirely. They're throwing around charged labels, clinging to any explanation that helps them avoid the truth, because they cannot accept a reality where the numbers favor the very player they've spent years trying to tear down. They're calling for legends like Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi to somehow step in and rewrite the hierarchy, as if emotion could override cold, hard data. But the game doesn't care about feelings. The hardwood doesn't bend to narratives. And while all of this chaos erupted in public view, the most explosive, game-changing development didn't happen on the court or online. It happened behind closed doors. Inside the guarded walls of the Langham Hotel in New York City, as the MVP announcement sent shockwaves through the sports world, something even bigger unfolded. A massive, unprecedented corporate surrender. The WNBA collective bargaining standoff is officially over.
Keep those people on threads away from me. After a prolonged labor battle, the WNBA and WNBA Players Association reached a verbal agreement on the terms of a new collective bargaining agreement early Wednesday, just 51 days before the league's 30th season is set to tip off. Quote, "The progress made in these discussions marks a transformative step forward for players."
I need you to truly understand the overwhelming, almost catastrophic weight of this timeline. After a long, brutally tense, and highly publicized labor battle that nearly derailed the most anticipated season in the history of women's sports, the WNBA and the Players Association suddenly reached a verbal agreement just 51 days before the 30th season tips off. Ask yourself, what? Why fold now after weeks of relentless, scorched-earth negotiations? The answer is brutally simple. The billionaire owners saw the FIBA MVP announcement, they saw the massive global ratings driven entirely by Caitlin Clark, and they compared them to the painfully low, almost irrelevant viewership of the veteran-led league, and in that moment, everything became clear. They realized they held all the leverage. Completely. They called the union's bluff. The players threatened a lockout, demanded a 50% share of revenue, demanded equal partnership, but the owners knew, with cold mathematical certainty, that the legacy veterans alone carried no real standalone market power. The entire financial engine of women's basketball, the new TV deals, the charter flights, the sold-out arenas, is being fueled, sustained, and elevated by what can only be described as the Caitlin Clark effect. The union stood firm and negotiated a massive deal, but the truth is undeniable. The foundation they stood on was built by her gravitational pull. And the irony is impossible to ignore. These are the same veterans who spent the previous season throwing hard fouls, firing off subtle shots online, and publicly downplaying her impact. They resisted her rise, questioned her spotlight, and even worked against her during the FIBA championship game. Yet when it came time to secure their financial future, they didn't hesitate to benefit from the very revenue she created. And what they secured is staggering, salary cap growth pushing average salaries beyond $500,000, guaranteed professional standards, even housing support covered by ownership. It's a financial transformation of the league. But buried beneath the celebration, the headlines, and the polished corporate messaging, one quote from that press conference quietly revealed the real reason this negotiation dragged on for so long.
This is Alicia Clark. What we just accomplished is going to change the lives of so many players, Clark said. We got you the best houses that they're going to pay for. And speaking from experience, players like me are going to be the ones that I think feel it the most. Yeah, the players on their way out? Yeah, that's why it's taking so long. That's why it's been taking so long, because old players like...
Listen carefully to the raw, unfiltered truth coming from veteran forward Alicia Clark. Speaking from experience, she admitted that players like her would feel this moment the most. Players nearing the end, veterans staring directly into the twilight of their careers. That single statement exposes everything. This is why negotiations dragged all the way to the brink. The established veterans knew this was their final shot, their last opportunity to secure a life-changing financial payout before walking away from the game. And they were willing to risk it all, even hold the entire 2026 season hostage, because they needed that Caitlin Clark-driven revenue to land in their accounts before it was too late. They were the ones slowing everything down, pushing aggressively for immediate revenue sharing, while younger players were ready to move, ready to play, ready to seize the unprecedented momentum building around the sport. It's ruthless, it's cold, and it's business at its most unforgiving. The veterans got paid, and they did it on the back of the very rookie they spent a year criticizing. But even now, with a verbal agreement in place, chaos is looming. Because a verbal deal isn't final, it still needs to be written, finalized, voted on, and officially ratified by both the players' union and the league's board of governors. And while lawyers argue over every detail, the clock is ticking fast. The WNBA calendar is collapsing under pressure. Expansion drafts for Portland and Toronto are approaching, the collegiate draft is locked in for April 13th, and then comes the biggest storm of all, free agency. Over 100 players, including nearly every major superstar, are about to hit the market because the previous agreement was opted out of. General managers have been frozen for months, unable to build, unable to plan, because the financial rules didn't even exist. But once this deal is finalized, everything explodes. The league is about to witness the most chaotic, aggressive, and unpredictable free agency period in its history. Teams will be torn apart and rebuilt overnight. Executives will scramble. Players will chase massive new contracts. And hanging over all of it is one undeniable reality. Caitlin Clark's dominant international performance isn't just impressive, it's a warning. A loud, unavoidable signal to the Indiana Fever front office that the future has already arrived.
26 season could get very dark for the rest of the league. Could get very dark for the rest of the league. Amber Cox and Kelly Crosswell have got to put an actual team around her, a team that will play to her play style. Got to do that. Can't bring in some old veterans who think that they're going to go for the MVP this year. We got to bring in some role players that know their role. Shout out to The Rock. Know your role!
Listen closely to the truth being laid out right in front of you. Amber Cox and Kelly Kroskoff, the architects of the Indiana Fever, are carrying an unprecedented weight on their shoulders. They hold what may be the most powerful offensive engine the sport has ever seen, and they're standing on the edge of the most critical free agency period in WNBA history. There is no room for error. None. They cannot afford to bring in ego-driven veterans who think every possession belongs to them. They cannot afford players who demand isolation touches or stall the offense just to feel involved. Building a dynasty around Caitlin Clark isn't complicated, but it demands ruthless clarity. You need specialists, rim-running bigs who set crushing screens and finish impossible transition plays. Elite, switchable defenders who can space the floor and punish defenses the moment they collapse. Players who understand their role and embrace it completely. Because the moment you introduce conflicting egos, the entire system breaks. If the Fever front office tries to appease veteran hierarchy instead of committing fully to Clark's tempo and vision, it's not just a mistake, it's basketball malpractice. The blueprint is already there. The tape doesn't lie. When you surround Caitlin Clark with players who run, who trust, who finish, the game transforms into something unstoppable, an equation defenses simply cannot solve. The league has survived its storm. It stood on the edge of collapse and walked away with a historic labor deal. The veterans secured their money. The owners locked in their billion-dollar future. And Caitlin Clark? She returned stronger, conquered the international stage, claimed the MVP, and proved that her playmaking exists on a level no defense can contain. Now everything is set. The Indiana Fever are officially on the clock. The 2026 season won't just be watched. It will be dissected, analyzed, and magnified like never before. This is where narratives collapse and reality takes over. This is where the business of basketball is exposed for what it truly is. And if you're paying attention, you already know, this isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning.